Oh,
There
here
she
she is.
is.
So now
Yeah.
I can sit down.
Okay. I don't know how much
Hi.
she heard.
Hi. How are you?
I'm well.
Good morning.
How are you?
We are good. Good. So
We I just
Leslie
started
started
I just
speaking.
started speaking a little bit, Maria, about like we would figure we'd talk about new construction and existing homes and the differences with financing. And I was just
Right.
saying, with new construction, often the contracts are very long. They could be a year and a half, depending on what you're buying. You're buying a building, new
Right.
construction in a building.
Right.
If you start applying for financing, you can't really lock in a rate. You have to plan that you have to hang in the
Right.
market and watch the market, and
Yeah.
really be able to finalize anything until really like a year down the road, kind of, or
Yeah.
6 months down the road,
Right.
depending on what you're buying.
Yes.
Right.
I always say, like, when I'm speaking to buyers, right, and they're and they're telling me that, like, they're looking at new construction, and I think you have to be of a certain mindset, in
Right.
order to purchase new construction, because I've seen through the years, like, people that were incredibly nervous about the interest rates, right? Like, like, oh, but I want to lock in a rate right now. And I'm like, well, that's, if you're buying new construction, you're going to give up that, right? You're not going to do that.
Right.
Or I've had, like, especially like younger people, like everybody's younger to me right now, but like, younger folks say, like, oh, well, what if something happens to my job? Like, will I be able to get out of the, what, like, can I get the loan approved now? But then if something happens to my job, will I still be approved? And I'm like, no, like, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
You have to feel pretty confident that you are still going to have good credit, still going to be gainfully
Right.
employed, that sort of thing. So if you're somebody that doesn't have that kind of mindset where you're like, okay, I'm going to go with the flow, then maybe new construction is not for you, right?
Right.
Right.
Um,
It's a risk you kind of take,
it's
right?
a risk that you take, yeah. But
But
on the flip side, you're getting brand
right.
new home. A lot of times you can pick,
Well,
some of the finishes, things like that are in there, and you're getting exactly what you want. If for somebody that's maybe in a rental, like, it gives them the time too, because, like, they don't have to break their lease. There's pros and cons to everything,
I
right?
think, well, your point, I think there are pros and cons of buying new construction. So
Right.
obviously, one of them is you really, whether you're buying a condo or a house, typically you have time, depending on where you come into the builder's, plan, where his timetable. You can customize it. So you could pick the kitchen, you could pick the counters, you could pick the tile, you could pick even the wood floors or how you
Right.
want to. So I think that there's a lot of pluses. I mean, obviously, there's minimal maintenance on a new construction, right? You're buying something
Yeah.
that's new, and
In
that
most cases, it's under warranty, and
exactly.
that's the thing. I mean, certain things, they are governed by the warranties.
Right.
Some are more limiting than others, but typically, there's some sort of warranty with new
For a
construction.
year, typically,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yep.
So
Build
usually,
it.
but like structural, it's like statutory. So there are certain things that just are very clear, like systems or structure, and there's different statute of limitations for each
Right.
one of those.
Right.
And
I
like,
think
and in the city, right? Like, there is a big difference between new development condo and, like, these older, let's say, co-ops and such, where there's, amenities, right? Like,
right.
totally different set of amenities. So
Right.
I think you have to try to figure out too, like, what's important, what's important to you, right? Is it, living, within close proximity to Central Park, or is it that, you like that there's a gym in the building, daycare,
Well,
there's so many amenities now. I can't even name them all in
well,
some of these new developments.
well,
Movie theaters, you can, have your own, like, movie theater within your complex.
well, you have so much. I mean, you can have pools, indoor, outdoor,
Yep.
even you can have a rooftop pool. I mean, these are buildings in the city or in the most metropolitan
Right.
areas. I think even in terms of a house, you can get a more modern design. You know, the way they build today is not the way they built 60 years ago or 80 years ago, right? The
Right.
construction material is different. The overall design is
Yeah.
different. I think it's into somebody's lifestyle today where you don't have to retrofit the house, you know, of 60 years ago. We have to redesign it. Even if it's renovated, it may not be to the liking or the mindset of today's buyers.
Right.
That's also a real advantage of buying new construction. And as you said, the amenities, even in a new house, you can have built-in coffee makers, you can have built-in sound systems. You can, it comes already made, right?
Yes.
Also electronically, it can have a lot of technology of today built
Right.
into it that you have to start rewiring your home. So
Right.
and there are all sorts of new gadgets, right, that I don't have in my house, and it's not a new house, but you know, a security system could be built in. So it's very different the way the builder will build today than the way they did
Years
years
ago.
ago.
Yeah.
Though, would be, right? Taxes on new construction, depending on where you live, is it could be based on the purchase price. So I know in some areas in Westchester, it could be 1.8 to 2% of the purchase price, which is significant,
Right.
Yeah.
right, for a buyer. And I don't think that they take that into account when they're buying initially.
I think too, I mean, like, so one of the on, you know, downsides, if you will, to buying new construction is that typically the closing costs will be higher, right? Wouldn't you agree, Michelle,
Right.
that, you know, typically, you know, a sponsor or a builder is going to pass some cost over to the buyer that would typically be covered by the seller, right? Like the transfer taxes. So you do have to, you know, make sure if you're looking at both new construction and existing construction, that you compare all of that, right? You know, like what will my closing costs be if I'm buying a $1.8 million new construction home versus a $1.8 million resale, right? Because there is going to be some differentiation there.
But I think you're always paying a premium for new construction. It doesn't almost matter where it is, right?
Yeah.
You're always paying for
Yeah.
a new build as opposed to a house that's been renovated, wouldn't you say?
That's true, but they
Yeah.
also pass off a lot of the fees. So in
Right.
other words, like often like new construction,
Transfer tax.
the transfer tax always, and in many cases, the attorney for like the sponsor does
Yes.
pay, and more times than not, you know. So that's definitely an added cost. So, and they're not, you know, it's not like a minimal fee. It's, you know, pretty
No.
significant.
They're pretty significant. They're pretty significant. I mean, I do think it's worth mentioning, like especially in the city, because there is still, you know, like whereas in so many areas, like we have inventory shortage, you hear
Huge.
that spoken of a lot. But there's still quite a bit of new construction that's available. So it is one of the few areas where I do see that you can maybe negotiate the sponsor or the seller, you know, giving you either a credit for some of those costs or, you know, covering that. Because, you know, I do a lot of new development in the city, financing of new development. And I always say, like, you know, when you're buying new development, um, it's you're not going to have as much success negotiating the sales price down, because they really, the sponsor, the developer of those buildings, they want to, you know, try to hold the prices like they've submitted in the offering plan. That protects all the other homeowners that are buying into the building, et cetera. But where you can negotiate is in like a seller's credit, right? So like let's say they're asking $2 million, and you know, you might be able to negotiate like paying 2 million, but getting $100,000 as a closing cost credit to use towards paying all of these extra fees that we're talking about, plus, you know, plus some of the other ones
Right.
that you would have regardless.
Right. I think in the city, you know, I think in Westchester, let's say, or anywhere where you build construction, often, you know, when the builder comes in, I could think of two particular houses. They bulldoze the whole land, right?
Yeah.
So all the trees that were there and the landscaping, it's no longer there. It's pretty much a barren site. So that, I think that's like one of the negatives. Like I've
Yes.
done developments in, let's say, Florida, they're barren, right? You have these little trees, like with twigs, basically,
Yeah.
throughout the development versus something that's more established, that you have beautiful landscaping and
Yes,
flowers and big trees. So I think that's like also one of the
for
negatives when you
sure.
construction. It's kind of like a barren
It
feeling, as
takes time. It takes years for it to become lush, right?
right.
Right.
So I
And
think somebody, that's something to consider when you're buying new versus old. And I guess it also depends
on who
where
the
you're
builder,
buying.
yeah, who the builder is, because
Right.
sometimes the landscaping is built into
Plan.
those agreements, so
Right.
it varies, sometimes a pool's even,
Yeah.
included.
Right, it depends. And I think it also depends on what's required by the municipality. So many municipalities require a certain amount of landscaping because it has to do with water absorption and runoff. So I think that that's also factored in. There's a lot, I mean, when you think of it, it's not just building a house, you have to build the whole area around
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
to deal with the environment, right?
Right.
So
For sure.
I think that's an important consideration as well.
And there's like sort of that middle ground where people are doing sort of like a flip, so they're,
Right.
meaning the seller is gonna do a flip, so they like basically are like gutting the house in most cases, and then there's sort of like, there's always like some modifications,
Right.
even outside, like with like an oil tank or a septic
Right.
system where it has to be moved because it's older,
Right.
that don't have that much latitude, so you're like right in the middle, it's not new, it's not
Right.
old,
Right.
so.
Right. And what I would say to folks that are looking at stuff like that, because I feel like we see a lot of that in our
Right.
area, is, you know, that's the difference between like like when you're buying brand new construction and you're signing a contract and you know that like the earliest the property is going to be delivered is a year from now, then your mindset's already there. And then you have like, when you're just buying a regular resale and you're hoping to close in, let's call it 45 days. I have a few clients right now that are doing like exactly what Michelle just described, like where they're buying an older home, but it's kind of like a flip, but the developer's taking care of that. And like they thought they were going to be closed a month ago, but it's probably going to be like a month from now. So it's
Right.
kind of like it's not a year, but nothing ever happens as quickly as you think it's going to happen with construction. So I would always say, like, always build in a few months buffer. And again, like this comes down to if you're getting financing, you have to, again, be flexible with not like feeling comfortable with, okay, I don't have to lock my rate immediately because truthfully, like I'm not even sure when they're going to be able to deliver the property to me, right?
I think, what Leslie mentioned is a good point because it really differentiates a flip. Somebody comes in and they not whitewash it, but they make it look really great. They'll change the fixtures, but they may not really give you all new plumbing.
Right.
So having said that, it's not new
Right.
construction, and I your warranties on the flip, or at least I don't think
In
so.
most cases, no.
No,
No.
right? So I think that's what's very important is people even say to me, it's new construction, should I do an inspection? I personally think you should inspect every property, but especially something that is a resale or something that's been flipped and kind of
Right. Right.
they come in and kind of gut out the house to some extent and put in new fixtures, but they're not putting in all new wiring, all new plumbing necessarily.
Right.
So really important to inspect those
I would,
properties.
It's definitely helpful. One of the things that happens though is, sort of, you have to factor that in and put that
Right.
into the contract. A
right.
lot of construction, like I've tried to put it in,
And they won't allow it.
they won't allow it.
They won't allow an
no.
inspection, but
No.
a flip will.
A flip usually,
Yeah, right.
but the new construction, they
They
never
won't.
want, they won't.
Yeah.
Like I try to put it in and it's rejected all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Crazy.
pros and cons, right? The old and the middle ground. And I think if anybody has any questions, feel free to contact one of us. And if not, we wish you a good week and we'll see you next week.
All right. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.